I'm here with Paul this afternoon. It just hailed in San Bernardino, where I happen to be, and all the mountains are covered. The low-lying hills are covered with snow. Very rare for us, middle March, but it's happening. And Paul and I are friends. We met at, was it the men's retreat, Paul? Or was it here in LA? It was here in LA, wasn't
Yeah, we met before in LA, and then we ended up going to the same retreat. So we
it?
got
Yeah,
to spend some quality time there and get to know each other a little bit.
yeah. So Paul and I talk, look at things. I do what I can to share my experience in terms of the mental obsession, the brain aspect of this mental problem, addiction, the central issue, the actual disease. So, anyway, take it away.
Yeah. Um, Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and Jack. Thanks for your time.
Yours too.
Um, it's nice to talk to you as always, because usually usually I got really confused, but in a good way.
Yeah.
So I was about to text you to like don't just go easy on me today. I
Well, I would suggest that's your job.
am I driving here?
No, no, no. My point
I,
is that to talk about, it's what we do with things that bothers us. It's what we do with things that confuses us. If the absolute state of reality is real and it's just that way, it's what we do with it in our thinking that seems confusing. So if the simplest thing is to acknowledge that the absolute state of being is absolute and there are no exceptions and it doesn't change, then there's not much to talk about there. But the thinking then can be seen clearly as something that is deserving of some attention.
yeah, I think I'm getting where we're going, and just facts. These are all facts. So like I can take it personal, and I can say like, wow, that was tough,
Yeah.
or yeah, you
And
know,
it's okay too.
I'm usually. What did you say?
Mhm.
What did you say?
I said it's okay if it's tough because you're admitting the toughness of the thinking you're doing. You start to see that I'm creating that impression. I do the same thing. And
Yeah,
when I think I'm not doing it is when I think I'm not thinking and feeling what I'm doing. So I think that it's everyone else and circumstances rather than saying, well, it's what I'm making of things that I'm really struggling with. It's not what things are because they're doing what they're doing and they've always and will always do what they do, whatever that is. If the level of influence I have on those things is so meager that I
yeah,
constantly think it shouldn't be happening, that's on me. That's me having half baked ideas, and I think they're ready to come out of the oven and be food for thought. They're not nourishing. So
yeah. Um, I have been sitting with it and contemplating on it, like the fact that I'm not my body, and I'm not my feelings and emotions, than who I am. And I made some beautiful discovery what is behind that. And
yeah,
and that's why like I'm able to be aware more than when I'm becoming my feeling and my thoughts, and I'm playing the victim, you know. I'm able to catch it more
yeah,
often, and I'm able to get back to reality quicker and faster, as a result of asking for help. Also, like just I love to get into a call and just reach out like a fellow to like, oh my God, this has just happened again. I was gone. You
right,
know,
right.
we're talking about pause when agitated, like how much time I'm spending like just being gone from the present moment.
Well, and that's an impression you create that you're gone because you're consumed and intoxicated with the havoc that you're creating. And as a result, that seems like all that there is because we've been thinking in such narrow, when we're thinking obsessive thoughts, we're thinking, a point Perspective is a broader aspect of a point than a point is. If you follow me.
Yes, I do.
If you look at from where our eyes are, and the further you look, you begin to realize there's more and more that you're seeing in that distance. We're
Yeah,
never
I'm.
we're never really away from the reality. We're just thinking we are because we become intoxicated with the upset, the conflict, the anxiety, the stress, the pressure, the less that sense of less than, the loathing, all those things. We seem to be drowning in, like you said earlier, I'm not my thoughts. If we were our thoughts, we'd be in them, having no perspective whatsoever, because we would just be them. And as
Yeah,
thoughts, we can see them, we can watch them, we can recognize that if we look at our words, we're actually revealing, the words are revealing what we're thinking, and often the words tell us better what we're thinking than what we think we're thinking.
yes, yes. Well, um, yeah. I'm able to. I don't know. I'm able to like be more. I spend more time in the sunlight of the spirit, or like I maybe in the present moment,
Yeah.
um, not obsessing. Um, the last 10 days probably than I don't know. I think I don't know. I'm going through some um, like another spiritual awakening. I'm not sure what is going on, but it's I don't know. Probably like your like your guidance and like just the conversation that we are having, and it's been uh, it's been mind blowing so far.
Well, you're starting to notice that the cover that you thought was hiding you behind the self you thought you were, the imagery and the narrative, the stories, the ideas, the makeup, has always been blown. You just believed it was intact. You believed it was reality. You had come to believe in yourself as being the creator of reality.
Yes. Um, yes. Yeah. Yeah. um, like the exercise you told me to like write down my feelings
Mhm.
and my thoughts and look at myself in the mirror and just I just it just made me realize that's absolutely not who I am, and it's um it's just been extremely helpful, and I really appreciate it. I able to recognize that, like, because I live my life like I was my feeling and I was my thoughts, and um that's not who I am. And I don't know. I'm just putting in practice on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Um, and I just have I don't know. I have an interesting experience in a good way.
And you had a very difficult experience recently that sort of woke you up to certain things that you had taken for granted were fine, and all of a sudden you realized it wasn't fine. That behind the imagery of fine, there was some very explosive emotions.
Yeah, I would say if that's not happening, I probably wouldn't be here where I'm at. So that's like was just
Yeah,
a beautiful challenge. Like I came across in my sobriety or in my life,
yeah,
and also like just the willingness to be open about it, because if I wouldn't call you or I wouldn't call like other people, it's like I would just be the same. I would just stay still, the same like who I was before. I mean, I am the same like who I was, but like how I act,
yes, very
and
good.
how I act is different, and it's beautiful experience.
Well, that was very well put, and I noticed that you're even noticing the words you use and correcting them as you go to be more accurate, which is which is part of what this conversation is about. We've developed a way of talking that supports the contention that all we are is what we think, and that's who we are, and there's nothing else to it than that. And so we're always fine, saying fine all the time when somebody asks, when we're normally not always fine. For the most part, in my experience, there's always something in my environment that isn't quite right. There's something going on. If I've managed to deal with most of what's near me, then there's things beyond that scope of things. that I start becoming aware of that can be upsetting and disturbing. There's a lot going on in the world that if they were happening to my family and friends, I would be very affected by it. But I've learned to think that because they're at a distance and they're not people I know, that they're not happening. And when I began to actually wake up, I thought, no, those things are happening. And they're happening to people who also have family, who also have families and also have friends who are very much affected by those things. The fact that I can think in terms that I'm exclusive to all of that shows how little the thinking I've been doing and little application of the potential of that thinking I'd been doing for years.
Yes, yeah, I I don't know. I have like a different also view about um, how I see my emotions because I used to run from my emotions all the time and just shut it down or like just numb it with whatever like um, substance or like or a routine like a self-harming routine, or we're talking about like um, any
Food.
self-harm. Yeah, any behavior or substance. Yeah, food is
Yeah.
one of my favorites. Food is one
Yeah.
of my favorites. It's so easy and so easy access too. It's like you're talking about not even drugs, but it is actually. Can be used as a drug. But I'm talking about like maladaptive behaviors here. All of it. What I can use to escape,
Right.
and I run away and. Ah, because like there is two ways when something happens emotionally for me, or some feelings or emotions comes like situations that I started feeling. I either gonna run away or I'm not, and I gonna start stuffing myself with whatever maladaptive behavior is available or like my choice.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just learning to not run or not doing any kind of these kind of behaviors. Just stay still and just sit with it.
Yeah. Talk about it. Breathe.
Yeah.
So
Um.
the idea that we could escape it is an interesting if you're a bank robber, you get out of the bank and you get away from the police, you might have gotten away with it. You really never have because you did the bank robbery, you stole the money. That's always going to be a fact. So there's really never any getting away. But I'm talking in terms of the way we use the term of getting away with it. The interesting thing is that we think within our thinking, we can run and move while we're taking the thinking with us in our head and think that we'll get away from it while it's coming with us. So, in a sense, the term is I got away with it. And that is, in fact, this is something that I wanted to use to point to how the words that when you begin to write down the words you use and look at them and the way you describe your feelings, you'll start seeing that those words are actually accurate for the thinking you're doing, not the being that you are, not the essence of who you are, but for the way you're thinking about you and the way you're thinking about life, the way you're thinking about things. So think about it. I get away with it. That's the terminology generally. It's admitting I'm getting away with it. I'm not getting away from it.
Yes. Um. For until I think like killing the time, I would say, or like I don't know how to describe it, but like just distract myself, um and it's just gonna get worse
Think
or
of the
not
word.
gonna get
Think of the words you just used about time. Did you notice what you said?
killed the time.
Yeah. Impulsive and reactive obsessive thoughts are suicidal tendencies. They're death wishes. They're trying to claim we have nothing to do with what's going on. The only way for that to be possible is if we didn't exist. And since so much of our belief system is based in making believe that who we think is that thinking is who we are, and our brain makes up our thinking, so our body is who we are. We think about killing the body to stop the thinking. When the thinking's very easy to stop when you don't start it. Very easy to stop. stop. It's very hard to stop when you think you need to stop it and don't want to admit that you're responsible for starting it. It's impossible then because you never get to the core of it. You've turned the effect into a cause. You've made believe that stopping it is the goal rather than seeing. It's like they say, it isn't the last drink that gets us drunk, it's the first drink. It's the starting
Yeah.
of the thinking that causes the problem. So it isn't to suggest we won't ever do it again, but as you begin to talk about it more, as you do, you'll begin to notice it quicker and notice that you know immediately that something's wrong. And that's all you need to know. That's it. That's knowing everything about it. Because the root of it and the story attached to it and the circumstances and the place and the time, all of that stuff is irrelevant. The fact is, it's wrong. It's never going to be right. To think I'm going to get it right by spending more time thinking about it or trying to chase it away is to give it credit for existing in some way that's valuable. And it doesn't have any, a wrong idea has no basis in reality, at least within the reality of this universe where the law and order of nature is fairly well defined. We don't always seem to understand what that means, but we know when we do something that the consequences of that thing we do absolutely mimic whatever the laws of physics are. If you jump off a bridge, you're going to hit the concrete or wherever you're jumping to in the same exact way that anyone who did that same thing at the same from the same location with the same wind conditions, whatever, would suffer. It'd be identical.
Yeah.
It's like shooting a cannon out. If you put the same gunpowder in, the same weight ball, you aim it the same direction. For the most part, you're going to get almost an identical arc. You get those arcs in mathematics. In outward experience, a lot of times there's variables like the wind conditions or the very slight difference in the way the thing discharged or whatever. But for the most part, you create an arc that's consistent and recognizable. And the point is, if that's actual if that's the law and order of reality, then we're constantly being given accurate information. Well, if I think my thoughts are who I am, I'm not valuing the information that I'm getting as a consequence of the experience I'm having. I'm thinking of it as something I got to get away from and can't take anymore and don't want it all. That's got me a victim, that I'm a victim to it because I think it's something happening to me rather than being caused by me. So simple. And yet it seems so complicated from within, thinking that more thinking about the thinking and stopping the thinking is somehow going to stop it. But it's exactly what it is. Anything well maintained will last a lot longer than something not maintained. That kind of thinking maintains the problem, and the problem never feels better the longer it's maintained.
Yeah. So, Jack, tell me, like, how can I, when I catch it, when I spend like a reasonable time, to being gone from reality.
Well, you never are. You
Yeah,
just think you are.
I think I am.
Yeah. But you can see when you think you're not in reality, you really have to. The only way for that to be possible is that what you're thinking is reality. So you can see that even understanding that you're not your thoughts, you can still act on that basis because of this thing we call the subconscious, where all of these things we want to claim to be irresponsible are motivating us and causing conditions that we want to make believe we have nothing to do with. So first of all, one thing, you're sensitive. I've known you long enough to be able to tell you that openly. That is a form of intellect. That's what intelligence is. Desensitization is a dumbing down and a stupefaction of potential. It's moronic, ignorant, because we're ignoring what's happening and thinking that that's the best thing we can do. Deny it, defy delusion, fall into a delusional state, thinking that all that's happening is what I'm thinking. So you're sensitive, and you will begin to notice, you'll start laughing at those things when they happen rather than start to go into that emergency survival mode that you have to get away from.
Yes,
It'll
Um,
start being funny immediately, and you're like, what I started saying is what my mom used to say to me. You're up to something. She could see it in my eyes. She knew it in the way I was walking. It was, oh no, not me. And as soon as I did that, she absolutely knew for sure I was up to something. My defense, like Shakespeare said, you protest too much, meaning there must be something there if you're protesting it so loudly.
yeah. Um, um, yeah, I think um, I'm definitely sensitive and
Yeah.
also overthinking all the time. Um, but able to catch it more often as well. And yeah, it's really interesting when I'm having having like a great day, and then I get up and um, I get up in a different state, and I have to or I think I get up in a different state, and I have to put some work on to get back to, I don't know, reality, or talking about some spiritual work.
Well,
Otherwise,
this idea that you're thinking things you don't think you're thinking will have you experience things you don't think should be happening.
yeah, I don't know. Like when I just get up and I really trying to like be in present, and I really feel when I'm washing my hands, when I go wash my face, wash my teeth, um, and I have days when I actually put my spiritual practice on the side a little bit, and
Shocking.
we were we were talking about it last time, that I already thinking that I actually didn't practice it. I gonna have a bad day because I did not put this practice on.
Well,
So
keep in mind, though, Paul, you don't have to think you're present to be present. And since you're just beginning to shift your awareness to realizing that thinking is something you do, there's still a lot of threads and roots to the idea that you need to do something to get back to reality. You need to feel like you're in the present for you to be in the present. And the reason that is because you've been thinking your thinking was reality, which meant there was no other reality. So everywhere you were felt like a place you shouldn't be and needed to get away from to get to that place that would finally give you what you would qualify as wanting to be present. You don't have to want to be present to be present. You don't have to like it to be present. There's no requirement because it's always the case. And to start focusing on that simplicity, that absolute state of simplicity to say, oh, I don't have to think I'm there to be there. I don't have to think I know that I'm there to be there. I don't have to believe I'm there. I don't have to have faith to be there. Absolutely present right now. And as the thinking starts to fall apart, you'll notice that awareness you'll just be washing your face. You don't have to think about it to be washing your face because you'll be washing your face. The thinking qualifying you to do it will be the thinking you're doing to do it. Simple. That's what thinking is designed to do. Help us manage our body to help our body function in directions that we would like to achieve.
so what do you suggest when I catch up myself when I'm gone from the present moment, when I'm gone from that awareness actually?
You're still aware. The awareness is actually in the present. It is the consciousness of the present is awareness. It's pure. It isn't adulterated in any way. It isn't half. You're just still
So
you're still stuck a little bit in the quicksand of making believe that your old thinking will still save you. And my experience is we've been doing this as a species so long, we really think it's normal, and it seems a little absurd and preposterous that it could be unraveled as easily as simply beginning to take credit where credit is due. And if I'm making a mess and don't feel present, that isn't because I'm not present, it's because I'm thinking about thoughts that have no basis in reality. I used to think they were reality. When I realized they're not reality, they don't have any basis in reality at all, except for the fact that they're thoughts. How and what I think is what I struggle with, not the thinking. Thinking is something that is designed to help us succeed and to survive in life, to create plans and to be functional and to take steps in an orderly fashion to get where we're going. If we didn't do those things, we wouldn't eat. It would just be some random confluence. But it isn't random. We intend to do the things we're doing. And yet we don't want to admit we're intending to do the things wrong and acting though they're right because we haven't bothered to stop and admit we're the ones doing it. All of that starts to become very apparent. My sense is everything that's happening is exactly what we intend to have happen. How could it always be happening this way if we weren't involved in it? However it is from my point of view, my perception, doesn't mean that's how it actually is. It just means that's what I'm thinking about it. So it takes out some of the pressure to try to get somewhere when you realize you've always been there. The impossibility is to get to a place you're always in. The possibility is to start to see that it's impossible to think you're not always. It's possible to think you're not always here, but it's impossible to ever not be here. Now, always. And I'll tell you, almost guaranteed you're going to cry over this as you start to come to terms with it because you're going to realize that you have been acting in ways, and you said it earlier, you begin to identify, it's my actions that I'm struggling with. How do I behave better? Well, when you're thinking correctly, your behavior naturally follows, just like your feelings follow. You don't have to worry about how you feel because you're not going to feel discomfort. You're not going to feel dejected and entangled and all of the other feelings that we want to escape. The feelings sort of neutralize. There's not the intensity of that. This idea of what was it? The self will run riot. That idea of actually being in the midst of a potential riot where people start doing things they would never do in their sane mind. But because you seem to be in this group, and my sense is that group is all the voices you have connected to all the thoughts you thought were actual reality, that each one of has an identity as though you're not just one person inside. You've got as many voices as there are thoughts that you're speaking to in terms of the thoughts you think you're the creator and have become. All of those voices, nobody says the voice in my head. Everybody always says the voices in my head. All those thoughts are speaking because we're addressing them as though they're real, so they're talking back to us so they can support the contention that we're right. And we're doing that. We're causing it so that we can look like we're right, even in our own thinking, which is a very isolated, separate, disconnected, disintegrated way to live. Integrity is about integrating, connecting, noticing there are no divisions between absolute nature. And that would be our nature on earth. We're not disconnected from any of it. We're absolutely a part of all of it. So talking about it, as you know, Paul, the conversation itself can be a bit confrontive because you're dealing with things. I don't try to pull back on what I say. I try to give you everything I got. Whatever I have in relation to what we're talking about, I want you to hear it because I want to learn to say it. I don't want to feel that I have to figure out how to avoid your feelings. That's called enabling. That's called thinking you don't have enough to withstand a conversation that includes thoughts that you've never considered or thoughts that may overwhelm your limited thoughts. What's the difference if your limited thoughts get overwhelmed? They're already overwhelmed because everything that's beyond them has always been real. It's always been accurate. It's always been available. It's always been there. We've just been living this numbed, desensitized state of existence, making believe they weren't. But you know from our experiences, when a little bit of time goes by and you're off doing something, all of a sudden little things hit. Because you know these, I'm not telling you anything. You know it. I'm using the words I've developed, which will not be your words. But you know it when you know it because you've always known it. You know it now, whether you think so or not. And when you start thinking in those terms, say, even if it's possible, just say, if it's possible that I know it, I want to begin to say, I know better, rather than say, I don't know. We say, I don't know all the time. If in fact we have an absolute state of being that's absolutely pure conscious awareness and the state of truth and reality, then we actually do know because we are a part of it. We're a byproduct of it. We are of it, not apart from it. Doesn't mean I know the
Mm.
details or how to apply it because that's a human. Now at least I'm free mentally to begin to be applicably functional. Functional literacy, I call it. I've read the body language. I've read it accurately. I've allowed what's happening to be happening. I know I'm the cause of it because I wouldn't be experiencing anything if I was a vegetable or had no ability to think. So the thinking I'm doing is primarily affecting my experience. And those little bits, you'll see that as you have some of that when it lands, it's kind of like it just stops you for a second because you know it's true, you know it's real, you know. And then the question is, what the fuck do I do with this? You're still in that other world that seems different when in fact you're starting to see that it was never what you made of it. It was only what you believed it was in your thinking. That was the only place that that seeming world that is different from the actual one ever existed. Just like lies and concepts and time, actually. Time and space, they're all concepts of thought. Time and space doesn't say, oh, I'm running out of time. Space doesn't say, oh, where do I go?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's like there is a couple of unbelievable or like aha moments happened when I was like, I just got shocked after, I don't know. I mean, I do know.
Yeah,
I just can't describe it.
yes.
What happened because it's just I don't know. It was just mind blowing. Just talking about like yeah, just the facts that like like who I really am and what am I look what am I um like what my part on it in this life or like what about like who I really am what am I doing here um and all this stuff what we were talking about like um just not identifying with my feelings and emotions and thoughts because those are not who I am um but accepting those because it's like I live my life
Mhm.
like I live 33 years like the way how that's who I am that's it is who I am
Yes.
um and yeah like realizing that that's not actually who I am it is mind blowing
Well,
and I can't describe the feeling.
it isn't who you are because it's something you do. And who you are is not a choice. It's an essence that isn't violable or it's immutable, indivisible. It's not something you can take or leave because it's not something based in time and space. It's based in an infinite realm that's absolute in every respect. Religion has done its best to speak to that, but it generally gets hung up with the identification that it creates to try to insist that that's the right one, rather than the right one is already the right one and doesn't need to be identified at all to be just that for all of us. It's always been that way as long as time has existed.
I just didn't know
You
or I
knew.
just don't yeah I knew but I just maybe just wasn't aware of it.
Consider too, Paul. Right now, you and I, everyone else, is at the forefront of all seeming time. Every new moment has never been witnessed or experienced before. It's brand new. And all that's possible, all that can be done is possible. And that includes thinking the impossible is possible, which is a delusional idea because it's asking that the limits, this universe that we're sharing things in, is limited within the functional capacity to any degree we apply ourselves in the moment. I can't get on a rocket ship without building it. That takes time. It takes an application of process. Time is a function of process and change. I need to take steps to get there, to learn, to drive a car, to fly a plane, to do those things, to plan in those directions. But if the knowingness isn't the thinking, then the mind you're talking about being blown literally is a single breath blowing out a candle that was never lit. You're blowing out the thoughts that you thought were alive, that carried light is probably our best metaphor for life. Because there is no apparent life without light, at least on this planet. I don't know all aspects of the universe and all the other options. But here, light, sunshine is required. The sun is always out. We don't always see it. Sometimes we're on the other end of the earth, so we think it's down. We think the sun is down, but it's never down. We talk about it in terms relative to our relative experience.
Yeah.
So that blown mind is literally a breath when you relieve. Rather than holding tension, it sort of lets go. It's like an ah. You said it, an ah. It's basically an release of all the tension. We're kind of holding our breath, thinking we're going to be not get enough air if we don't do that. And that's where tension is held in the body.
And
I'm losing your reception's gotten a little weaker all of a sudden.
What about now?
Still a little
Good?
wobbly. Still a little wobbly.
What about now?
That's better.
So, I would describe those moments as I really came home. I don't know. I would say like reborn. I
Yeah.
would say, like realizing that like I actually don't have to run. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to look for anything. I'm just already whole. At that moment, I felt like that aha, and like wow, and beautiful feeling.
Part of the accumulation, I was starting to say this and I dropped the point, but part of the accumulation of what you're talking about, the moment, that freshness, that awareness, the immediacy of it, the birthing of it, meaning you're actually realizing that life itself is always new, meaning everything that's possible is always possible. So there's no lack of choice in that. We have no choice over the being nature of our existence, and yet the being nature of our existence within this human experience gives us the possibility of choice. So we are all at the forefront of all time that's ever been spent, however we define that, process, change, whatever. And the DNA we have is representative of every other human that's ever lived. And to the degree that they wore this tension in some way, and I don't think that it was always worn exactly the way we wore it, but it certainly, given that humans have been killing humans as long as humans have been alive, and see them as the major threat, we're one of the greatest predators on the planet. There's obviously something been going on that hasn't really had us operating on our highest level, the best level, the most productive level, the most beneficial level. But interestingly, in that moment that you were talking about, when those things occurred to you, it's that moment right now, by the way. Everything that's possible is possible. And one possibility is being able to say, oh, I'm here now. I am absolutely here right now. I am always right here now as a human. That isn't an option. It isn't a choice. I'm always there because that's the nature of nature. And the healing aspect of that is to notice that we were never really sick. We created sickness to justify that we were right. It's a byproduct of the consequences we created to say, see, I knew I should be afraid of life. I knew life was difficult. I knew God damned us, and I don't understand. Why would God do those things? All the excuses we created were the justifications that we weren't creating those messes in the thinking we were doing. We're not the creator of reality, but we're certainly the manifester of the effects that we create.
Yeah, you you texted me like another day that like experience is not what happens to me. Is what I do is what happens to me.
Yeah.
And like, it's also like, I have to like sit with that a little bit. um, and yeah, just take it as is, whatever my experience is.
Well,
And then I can
you're
change it.
starting to. You're doing that. So you give credit where due. In the brutality of obsessive thoughts, we can't beat ourselves up enough to get them to become true and real and fixed. Ever. In this process, I still have a lot of old behaviors that I use. Some of them are to think that I'm an asshole and an idiot because I'm doing it again. But that's just old behavior that I'm still addicted to, that I'm still suffering from in terms of this chronic, unnatural, abnormal state that I thought was natural and normal.
So what do you do when you see it? It's coming.
Well, I never see it coming. I feel it where it is. And
Okay.
so do you. That's why you know when things are wrong, and you feel gloom because you'd rather them not be that way. And the problem is, it's the thinking you're doing about things and not the things you're thinking about that's causing it. The gloom is that you're once again setting yourself at odds with what you're doing rather than seeing that you're the creator of that. And as soon as you start noticing that, you'll start noticing that a lot of things you thought were really horrible really aren't that bad. And they're very easy to accommodate. And there's value in it because you'll start learning from them the deficiencies that you're finding to be gloomy and less abundant, scarce, and threatening will begin to be lessons you haven't bothered to learn from the curriculum that life is constantly giving us. Like I talked earlier about physics and the cannonball and those arcs always being the same if the same energy, the same weight, and all those things are in play. They're always going to do that. Within
Yeah.
this absolute state of being, there's none of that. So peace is the nature of that awareness, stillness, the nature of that awareness. We wouldn't know what's wrong. And knowing what's wrong so quickly, think about how well we are all versed in how wrong the world is and people are and they are, while we seem to be struggling with what's wrong and what we're doing. How quickly it goes from me to everyone rather than say, oh, I'm manifesting that effect to begin with. I started it. I can continue to start it. I'm free to continue to start it. And pretty soon it becomes pretty obvious that that's a stupid thing to do. It just doesn't make sense anymore, any more than drinking or drugging makes sense. I can think about drinking, but I know exactly where it will go. Maybe not immediately, but within a very short period of time, I can tell you what the arc of that cannonball is going to be. And it's going to crash.
Mm.
So I can drink. I'm free to drink. I just know now where it's going to take me because I know that whatever the accumulation of genetics that I have certain things that seem to be impossible for my body to tolerate. I can't metabolize sugar. I'm not good with carbs. Alcoholism is all about sugar. It's an inability to metabolize sugar. So what do? I can't metabolize it, so I try to drink more of it. That's the addictive cycle. So if I'm having an experience and not simply conceding that I'm having an experience and thinking that I shouldn't be having the experience, I'm doing exactly what I used to do with drinking when I thought, you know what I need? I can't handle the first drink, but what I need is the second drink. And I can't handle the second drink, but what I need is the third drink. And I can't handle the third, but what I need is the fourth. And I just keep going and going and going and thinking someday it'll work. And yet that day never comes because the problem is in the present, and that wish and that hope is always in the future, always lamenting the past. And there really is ultimately no past or future. It's just memory being used as though it's reality because I think my thoughts are reality. And so I think there's no escape from it. I can't change it. It's my reality. That's it. That's just who I am, people say. I'm only human. Well, all of those are lies. It isn't my reality. It isn't who I am, and I'm not only human. I have a human body. I have a body I've been given responsibility for that I get to freely think for, choose for. And to take that freedom and turn this experience into a contemptful, spiteful, hateful, loathing process is all on my choice. Doesn't matter who's done it and how long they've done it. It's me doing it now that causes that. Any of us. Wrong is absolute, like right is absolute. Wrong will never work. Right will always work. If you learn to do something like ride a bike, it doesn't take a lot of experience to continue to do that for your entire life. All the falling and all the worry and all the woe and all the fear never has to be re-experienced, never has to be gone through. Because you know you can do it. You've done it. Period. Over. Done. Easy. Simple.
Yeah.
And yet when it comes to thinking, we think, oh no, this time I got it. This time, yeah, the fear and all those, rather than notice the fear is actually generated by us and it's creating a threat to our existence because it's creating stress and anxiety, which is almost always included in any written definition of a disease. Stress and pressure and anxiety are always considered things to either help reduce your stress. That's what they say. You get healthier. Why? Because it's sick to impose ideas on us that aren't true as reality and wonder why we're struggling with trauma. It's present traumatic stress. It's not post. It's present that we're dealing with. And we're inducing it. We're imposing it. You and I do it in the exact same way while we have different names and places and times so that we can think it's really unique to each of us. Imagine going to such an extent to have something miserable, to finally formalize something miserable as being ours. That's called crazy on its face, I would say.
Yeah, like so what do you say about really processing these traumas? Like, I have so many memories that I don't remember, like growing up at all.
Well, your current experience is incorporating all of them. So you don't have to go back to get them because you have them where you are. It's what you're doing now. Some of those behaviors you talked about earlier that you want to straighten out, change. When we talk about behavior, normally we're thinking of things we can do better. Some of
Yeah,
those, go ahead.
acting on, just saying like, yeah, behaviors and acting out as well.
Same thing.
Also something, yeah.
Same thing. They're behaviors. Acting out is thinking by doing those things we'll feel better because we're trying to throw it up, basically. We're trying to throw up the nausea and the vomit and the sickness that we've been maintaining. So we want to put it out there in the world, share it with everybody, and think that we're helping them. That's like going to the bar and throwing up on the guy next to you to share your experience with them. Not going to be very welcome, but we do it in our own experience. We do it to this seeming self that we call ourself, that isn't ourself. It's just our thinking about itself that I'm terminalizing as a terminal problem. As you start talking about it, you start noticing it, it becomes a little bit easier. You see it a little faster. You begin to notice, I've always known this. I just didn't think I did. Because thinking was thought to be reality, we gave all the credit to thinking and not to our actual experience. The culmination of every moment includes everything that's ever happened to everyone. And it's not just the things you went through individually, Paul, where you think they were specific. World issues affect you and impact you and are right now. In every respect, everything that's happening is what this moment is made of. Everything, everywhere. And to take that self-centeredness that we call it out of the equation, that starts to become more apparent naturally. You realize that it's easy to be upset when somebody close to you dies, but you don't find that same ease when someone a mile away or two people away die. And that's kind of curious that we have these things happening and we don't always know how to deal with people who are going through that, grieving. It's very difficult. And I just went through this with my daughter, and people say, I don't know what to say. We don't talk about it openly. We literally don't know what to say about it. It's a very natural thing, but it's a very shocking thing because we think our bodies, we've ritualized the idea of our body being who we are, and we think that that's all we are. And when somebody goes, we feel that's the end of them. And maybe it is. I suspect there's more, and I suspect that more isn't something that's quantifiable in more or less, but just an absolute state of being that has always been and always will be, and is shown throughout the universe in the terms of how the universe is functioning. We don't even have to understand it for it to be doing exactly what it's doing right now to allow us to even have a conversation, you and I, and have anyone else listen, all simultaneously happening without even understanding it all. We understand it enough to know it's doing what it's doing. It's been doing what it's doing. I think I might be able to count on it. Like breathing air. We don't have to worry about there's enough. We take a breath and we know there's plenty. Even if our breath is shallow, we seem satisfied with that. We don't tend to get up in the morning and say, I don't think there's going to be enough air today. And yet we
Yeah.
can't see it. We don't understand it chemically. I'm not a chemist. I understand that that water's H2O and oxygen is air, and but it's got a chemical makeup like our body does.
Yeah. That the grief part is like, um, I don't know how to experience it, or like I actually experience it, but I don't know how to sit with it and what to do about it.
Yeah,
I also lost my dad in the previous year, like almost like 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, and I acted like nothing happened.
right.
When I actually got the news that what happened, like I was just like, yeah, I'm keep going to the beach. I keep gonna have my run. I'm gonna have my smoothies, and I'm gonna have do this and that, and that's it. And I'm gonna go to sleep. And actually, like a loved one, like was just gone. It was
Yeah,
like a really close, like probably like one of the most close men in my life was just gone, and I was like, okay, everything's okay.
right,
Um, and I stuffed myself with food,
right.
sugar, actually, um, because that was the behavior I choose. But that's what I'm learning. What like not to pick up anything, like actually be okay with those feelings and how to even grieve. Like I don't know. I don't know what does that mean at all.
Well, if we've been pretending that what we're thinking is reality, and then we've been pretending that we shouldn't feel what we're feeling, think of that. The feelings, the thinking that we're doing is creating our feelings, and then we think we shouldn't be feeling the feelings. And most of the thinking we're doing is based on grief and mourning and loss because we think we're the creators of reality and don't think there's any other reality. That's a great loss. That's a terrifying loss. We're alone in the universe. We have to keep thinking about the universe constantly, or the universe evaporates and disappears. How could we do that to everyone? In our own process, we've been grieving the whole time, acting as though it's not happening. So when it happens, we act as though it's not happening. And we're good at that. But the fact is, we care for people. Sensitivity means we care. We are considerate. We are aware. We know more than we think. So we know better. We don't just know what's worse. We actually know better than what's worse. And what's better is not worse. So starting to think of those things, you realize there's a lot of people. I mean, what I realized with my daughter is how many people in my life now that are still alive in this experience we're having of life that I don't give myself to in the ways that I wish I had given myself to her. So the death actually becomes a very, very big lesson in this process to face things in a very stark, almost cold way, because there's no negotiating out of it. It's a very severe occurrence. Nobody's coming back because I wish they will. Nobody's coming back because I hope they will. Nobody's coming back because I have faith in them. Now, at the same time, maybe they haven't left. Maybe that essence is the same essence that we all share, and death isn't. Maybe what we're mourning is the idea that we've imposed this experience on our body to go through this mourning and loss, when in fact we haven't lost anything but an experience of another physicality. And we've been thinking of it as life so long, we think it's so horrifying, when in fact it was never the life of the individual anyhow. Their essence was always the same and still remains. It doesn't go away. So lots of ways it can be looked at. But
Yeah, I mean,
talking about it seems to make some sense. We don't talk about death in our society very well. It's almost a secret. Bury him in the ground. Get it over with.
yeah.
Your 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 phone's going through it again. No, it's still wobbly. Still,
No?
you know. I think my reception's pretty strong.
I don't know.
Yeah, yours is wobbling. So, Paul, this is an if you can hear me, this is an hour, and maybe this is a good time to stop this time. But I want to continue to do this with you, and I also want to learn to give you more room to begin to define in your own words what you're experiencing, and then I'll challenge you with my thoughts.
Okay.
So you can develop. And I know my experience is the time in between the conversations tends to be the time that the actual practical application begins. The applying, the relying, applying, and trying. That process of just starting to put these things into play. Meaning we're interacting with people on that basis. We're talking to people about that. We're starting to think in those terms. So
Yeah, I also invited you. So,
you,
um,
now you're back.
what was it?
Now you're back. It's the first time I'm
Okay.
here.
Yes. So, yeah, I didn't hear you. You said like you're going to challenge me with something. I missed that. I missed that out. What did you say?
Well, I want you have a very clear idea of what's going on because we've talked about it and I've heard you say those things, and I want to give you more room to say those things because I think it's helpful for listeners. While I may prattle on and want to share what I have to say, helpful for people to hear you in your earlier inception of this, putting words to it that are as accurate or clearer than mine. And that's important because anybody listening is going to end up seeing this in what they think is their own way. But when they start noticing they know it, they're going to realize that it's something we all have because the stability of it couldn't possibly be so stable if everyone didn't share it. You begin to see, oh, that's that awareness of awareness, that knowing of knowing, that moment of, aha, like you said earlier. It becomes obvious that this isn't a secret, it never was. And it isn't
Yeah.
something that people don't have. It's something we all have. So if I think you don't have it and I think I need to give it to you, I'm lying to you about what you have. That's not a good start. That's not a relationship. That's a corrupt concept. That's an interreactive relationship, meaning I'm setting you up to be reactive because you know better and I'm acting as though you don't. And largely through history, cults and people who claim to be leaders have used that tactic. They become necessary rather than see that independence is ultimately what freedom is about, not dependence. When you're dependent on absolute freedom, you're independent of any other dependence because you don't even need depend. You don't even, like we talked earlier, if you're always in the present, you don't need to be dependent on absolute freedom. You're already dependent on it. We're just naturally dependent on it. When we start thinking that way, we start acting that way, and the action becomes confirmed immediately, and you know you're on the right path because you know every step you're taking is moving in a direction that has some form of meaning, but greater than that, benefit for everyone else.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, you do.
I do. I do know. I just can't describe it somehow,
Yeah,
some way,
that's all right.
sometimes.
But you're doing it by saying that.
And I experiencing it too. So it's like, it's not like I don't know what you're talking about. I actually do.
Yes.
So, and it's beautiful. I think it's, um, talking about like, I don't know, the big book talks about like we're going to know a new freedom and the new happiness. I think this is it.
Well, and it's every moment. That's why it
Yeah.
says new. See, if it was old, it wouldn't be new. If it was the old happiness that I've had for a long time that I keep pretending I'm happy about, that isn't it. It's the new happiness, meaning now I'm happy in a way I've never been before because it's newly happening. That's always the case, even when I think I'm happy in some old way. Even when I thought I was holding on to things that I wasn't holding on to because there was nothing to hold on to. I still remember that I held on to those things in my thinking, but I began to realize I never held on to anything. I was never disconnected from the present. I was never outside of the truth and reality. I was simply making believe that the intoxication of my thinking, because it's who I thought I was once I thought they were real, my thinking, was all that I could do. What else could I do? And then suffer from all those consequences of intrusive thoughts attacking me, stuck in my head. All of those words we use to give this indication that we're victims to something we're actually creating. That's the insanity of it. We're not even doing the thing we think we're doing, but we think we're doing the thing that we think we're doing. That's the problem. Easy to be resolved because you can realize if I'm doing something delusional, it has no basis in reality. I'm not actually even doing it. I'm just thinking I am. I'm doing gymnastics and acrobatics in my thinking and thinking when I stand up, everybody's going to raise a card with a 10 on it. Give me the highest score. I'm working to impress everybody with how great I am because I know that there's no basis to the I am I'm thinking about, to the self I'm thinking about. The I am is the I am, not the self I talk about. I am talking to myself. Clearly, the I am in that sentence is who I am. The self is not.
And the self is like when we're talking about like the thinking comes in, or like talking about self-destructive thinking, talking about like obsession.
Yeah.
Um, that's that's not who I am. Who I am, and like talking about selflessness, how to be selfless. Um,
Well, you already are.
I am.
You're selfless, except that the self you actually have is the same one everyone has because it's infinite. But all those other terms, self supporting, getting over ourselves, all that stuff is trying to, that's where this death wish comes in. We're literally trying to kill the self we made up that never had a life while it's killing the body that we were given to experience life. The tension and anxiety is wearing us out, literally. It's causing diseases and manifesting all those things. And all those things are road signs saying, hey, you made the wrong turn. You might want to, like the GPS does, it says, proceed to the route, proceed to the route. You know why it's saying that? You're not on the route. You're not on the route.
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
It's good. You're 32, right?
I'm 34.
34.
Got
You-
sober at 32.
You're a youngster,
I am.
and yet you can see how quickly that wisdom can become evident in your own experience because you know that you know it. And when you begin thinking about it as something you know, you'll start seeing the wisdom that thinking was designed to express naturally. Rather than be a dumbass or a smart ass, you'll become a wise ass. In your expression, in your thinking. It's just what you're doing. And what we're doing has a big impact on other people's experience. And if we're constantly putting them in crisis for doing things that create that inner reactivity, we're helping them generate the traumatic episodes that we want to claim we know better than. We know what to tell them to get out of it, while we're in fact reinforcing it in them simultaneously. That's actually something I need to work on a little bit, because I'm starting to see that this I've seen it for a while, but it's getting clearer that enabling is the idea that I have something somebody else doesn't have, and they don't have what I have as a result. So what are we doing, like with the people on the streets? We're going to build them condos. That's going to solve their problem. Well, in a lot of cases, they get those condos. They're not any better. They just now have a place to do drugs. And a lot of those units have been burned down by people because they haven't been mentally prepared for it. They're not thinking in terms, they're thinking by other people giving them something, thinking what they need is a commodity and they'll be better. And that's the same thing as drinking or drugging. Same thing as reckless sex or excessive food, poor quality food, all that kind of stuff. It's the exact same thing. It's just another way of making believe if we can become compulsive and act out, we're getting away from the problem. When in fact, the problem's just growing because it's not being addressed at all.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Love you, brother. You're a good
I
man.
love you too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
I love doing this.
I do too.
I'm getting less confused. All the like after our conversation, I'm getting like less confused, and I feel less stupid as well.
Well, as you start seeing what you do, you'll notice at times you will do those things and feel those things because those things are telling you accurately what you're thinking and how you're thinking and how you're utilizing your thoughts. And when I feel stupid, I know that I'm thinking something that's really dumb. And I know that it's probably a good time to sit for 2 minutes or a breath and just begin to look at things in a much more cohesive, indivisible, symmetrical, synchronistic way, simultaneous. It's all happening, everything right now. We can see the absolute in our environment by starting to think in absolute terms and realize everything that's happening has always been happening. And the only time it's ever happened isn't in time, it's in the present where there is no time because there is no past, there is no future. It's the immediacy of everything that is simultaneously happening right now. And it's always new, so it can't get old. It isn't on a continuum. It isn't a before and after thing. It's just an ever present, all knowing awareness. That knowingness is the all possibility of we can do whatever we want, we can think whatever we want, and what we think feels like we're condemned, it's the thinking we're doing that's contempt that's causing it. And that's our education. The absolute nature of that is we're always being educated, whether we decide to show up in class and open the textbook and look at the body language as something that's telling us this information, giving us this information, is a choice we make. It's not one we have to make. So we can fight, we can deny, we can rely on things that are false and make believe they'll someday be better. But we, during that time, will continue to feel the devalued, depreciated ideas and thoughts about our seeming life, when in fact it's only about our thinking that we're actually feeling. So carry on. You'll see during the week you'll go and start laughing because you already know you know. And as you begin to admit that, see that, you're going to start to realize, oh, this isn't a joke, but it was a joke to think that this imposter that I created as a seeming self was never me to begin with. That was a joke that was not very funny. So all
Yeah,
of a sudden, it become very humorous.
yeah. Like what I feel and what I like how I um what I really think that I just like literally started living. I actually haven't like, or I don't know how to describe this, but um, I just started really living just a different life from, I don't know. I like since like I don't know, last couple of weeks, something started. I'm just like, having a different experience.
So I'll give you something to think about. As you became ready to face things honestly, you began facing things that you'd been facing dishonestly, and one of those situations exploded and seemed very difficult. So, in one respect, you'd been maintaining that relationship and the way you'd been maintaining it by trying to make believe that if you were nice all the time, nothing would explode. And when you finally said what you felt honestly, you actually spoke up honestly, you saw the explosiveness that was there the whole time. And it's exact what you saw in him is perspective to see what you do in your own experience. With others, it explodes inside ourselves, it implodes, which is what depression feels like.
Yeah, and regardless of him, like he was being a part of this, part of my experience and my story. Um, as I came across to like having this experience or like this awakening or like, I don't know how to call it. Um, but it was just really like, I don't know, God presented this opportunity to either, because I could just go and just keep doing what I was doing, and I could just, if I
So
if I wouldn't stop.
keep in mind when you use God, we've been blaming God for not giving us stuff to justify the things we're not willing to claim we already have. If God's infinite, we already have it all. Book says you cannot give what you do not have. What would an infinite being or consciousness give us? Would it give us a little bit and say, okay, I'm just going to give you some scraps and see how well you survive? Why would it do that? That wouldn't be beneficial. That wouldn't be loving. It wouldn't be caring. It would be cheating, saying, here's what I am, but you're not getting that. It's exactly what I just described in the idea that you don't, I have what you don't. And I'm going to tell you to listen to me and follow me. And I become a cult leader or a dictator. Never goes well. So if that absolute power is already given everything to you, it isn't because you didn't have it. It's because you've been blaming God for the thinking you were doing that was deficient.
Yes.
Now, this other gentleman gave you a chance to see what you do internally by witnessing it externally. And I would say that's perspective. I don't always see what I'm doing in my thinking as clearly as I do once I talk about it. And very often I don't see it clearly until I act on it. So I'm not hesitant very often to do the wrong thing. I often embrace it. And I say the things that my brain says, don't say that. And then I go right ahead and say it. Because if I'm trying to censor my own experience by not allowing things that are happening for me, I think somehow my thoughts are so objectionable and so unacceptable and so impossible to ever share that I have to be on constant alert. That's the old thinking. Now, if I feel it's wrong, I just want to say it to say, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but this is what I'm thinking. Well, that's easy for somebody to hear because now they say, like I had another friend who told somebody very frankly what he thought, and the other guy said, well, that's what you think. And he was completely offended. And I said, think about how quickly you were willing to finally speak honestly about your thinking, and then how quickly you reacted to the fact that he was actually telling you exactly what you were doing, which was you were sharing your thoughts. He didn't become your thoughts. If your thoughts are reality, we think they're going to, if we think our thoughts are reality, we think people are going to become our thoughts once we share it with them because that's the only thing that can be. That's the only reality there is. So they have to be that way or else they're enemies. They're fucking with us. They're not respecting us. It's not true. So it's a little tricky at first. And I realized I had so many ideas about what the right thing to do was that I just didn't begin to embrace the wrong thing and say, you know what, I'm going to share this. And what happens, like in Katie's in my relationship, she started speaking about things she'd never said to me that she felt were so petty that I couldn't hear it. And when I heard it, I said, of course, that actually makes sense. So acting on those things, I had another friend some years back who had been in a marriage for a long time, and he said, my wife doesn't respect me. And I said, why should she? You're lying to her all the time. You're trying to please her all the time. She knows that's not how you think. She knows you're trying to kiss her ass to buy her off and keep her quiet and not, she knows all that. And he said, do you think? And I said, absolutely. Guaranteed. So I said, start saying the things you don't think you should say. And 2 weeks later called, he said, she's never respected me more. He said, I say the most outlandish things, and she now knows that I am willing to tell her what I think and risk losing her affection, which now she gives me in a brand new way, because she can trust me. I said, because you're telling her, you don't have to be telling her the truth. We already share the truth. But if you can tell her honestly what you're thinking, she knows that you'll be telling her things that you would normally keep to your own experience. So that's what we're doing in this conversation, is beginning to kind of break the bounds a little bit and start to operate on a basis that is maybe a little freer, while at the same time pushing those bounds that can be a little challenging and difficult and seem to make things confusing, when in fact the thing that's confusing is that you're starting to see clearly the confusion you've been living with and thinking it was normal.
Yeah, and I can't unseen it anymore.
Yeah, right on.
Cannot. And
Exactly.
it's beautiful.
Well, and that's healing. Healing is healing because it's natural. Disease isn't natural. So when we're thinking in terms that are wrong, we're creating new disease and praying for healing, rather than actually, like you said, you can't unsee it. Once you know, you don't get on a bike upside down or try to ride it by turning the pedals backwards, or start the pedal where you put the brake on immediately. You know better, so you function better. And when we think in terms that align with what's happening in reality, the natural nature of intuition becomes obvious. And intuition is defined as knowledge beyond reason, meaning there's no thinking or understanding in it at all. Nothing. No logic. It's just we know we know. If we know we know, we don't have to think much, and the thinking will automatically, just like opening up a faucet, the water knows what to do. It's sitting there waiting the whole time. All we are being asked to do is allow that to express that like a channel. Let it run through our fingertips and our mouth and our actions, so that we start noticing the benefits are so great compared to constantly having to make amends and clean up and make up for the dysfunctional thoughts we've been acting on. When you start doing it freely, you're not gonna hurt people, because you're gonna be telling them, I don't know if this is right or wrong. You're not telling them you need to understand this is my truth and you better listen to me. You're saying, I don't even know if it's right or wrong. I just want to say it because I'm thinking it. Boom. I guarantee you that will open up relationships more than telling people you want to open up a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. The truth it is, honestly.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be right. We don't have to be right to be honest.
Yeah. Anyway, I love you.
Love you, man.
Have a
You
great
too.
day. Bye.
You're a
Bye.
good man. Ciao.